The extreme right is an extremely dangerous political force. The extreme right seeks to participate in debate and argument, discourse and discussion. The extreme right seeks to justify their worldview. The extreme right engages in reasoning and consideration. The extreme right builds their ideology on strong arguments and rational considerations. But what if I told you that all of this is just a facade? What if I told you that these people hate debate and argument, discourse and discussion? What if I told you that these people hate consideration and contemplation, logic and reasoning? What if I told you that these people hate the idea of justifications and good reasons? On a philosophical level, the extreme right despises these things. The extreme right believes in instinct over reason, emotion over rationality, nature over logic. The extreme right despises ideas such as logic and reason, justification and consideration. The extreme right believes that humanity is fundamentally irrational, that instinct is what matters. They condemn reason as a component of the modernity that they despise. They reject reason as a product of the Enlightenment that they detest. On a philosophical level, the extreme right is opposed to reasoning. They hate the idea of having to justify their beliefs. This requires the abandonment of the thoughtless instinct that they favour. You can disagree with my characterization if you like. Spend just a moment observing the extreme right, and you will see that I am right. The far right, the extreme right, does not care about reasoning or justification. They care about nature and instinct. They reject reasoning and justification as components of the modern culture that they hate. The policies of the extreme right make this even more obvious. They reject democracy. They hate freedom of speech. They hate freedom of the press. They kill and imprison those who criticize them. They engage in intense censorship and mass indoctrination. These are not people who care about reasoning or justification, thought or logic, argument or rationality. These people are fundamentally irrational. They detest the very idea of thought and argument, discourse and debate. They prohibit and punish these things whenever they take power. They brutally crack down on thought and argument the moment that they can. They hate thought and argument, reasoning and justification. They despise these things. The worldview of the extreme right cannot be justified because it is opposed to the very idea of justification. The worldview of the extreme right cannot be argued for because it is opposed to the very idea of argument. The worldview of the extreme right is unjustifiable. In order to justify it, you would have to embrace reason and therefore abandon it. You cannot argue for this worldview because doing so requires acknowledging the value of that which it seeks to eradicate. Always remember this. The extreme right does not regard reasoning and justification as an intellectual exercise, but as a tool for winning support. For the extreme right, logical consideration and rigorous reasoning is not an intellectual exercise, but a tool of advocacy. The extreme right despises these things. They are merely a means towards an end. The extreme right pretends to value these things because doing so allows them to become more powerful. Once they have secured power, they will eradicate the very things they use to achieve it. The extreme right is fundamentally irrational, and they know it. They do not care about logic or rationality, reasoning or justifying. When they engage in such things, they are constructing a facade that gives their ideology a degree of legitimacy that it would otherwise not possess. Do not mistake our political opponents for rational and reasoned thinkers. Do not mistake our political opponents for brutal followers of logic. They will portray themselves as such, but this is merely a facade to secure power from a culture that adores such things. The extreme right is not rational or reasonable. The extreme right hates rationality. The extreme right values instinct. These people are not logical. They are primitive, animalistic creatures. They will follow their instincts off a cliff, and they want you to join them. Do not let the facade of rationality trick you into doing so.